Late one stormy evening, in the quiet outskirts of a bustling city, the sound of pouring rain was punctuated by the occasional flash of lightning. In a deserted stretch of road, a sleek black luxury car came to an abrupt stop. The vehicle's headlights illuminated the pouring rain, but the engine refused to start. Inside, Richard Morgan, a prominent CEO of a multi-million-dollar tech firm, sat in frustration. He was on his way to an important dinner meeting that could potentially seal a massive deal, but now he was stranded with no sign of help in sight. Richard, who rarely faced inconveniences due to his status and wealth, cursed under his breath. He tried calling for roadside assistance, but the relentless storm had disrupted phone signals in the area. His polished shoes and tailored suit were of no help as he stepped out into the rain, waving futilely at passing cars that sped by, indifferent to his plight. Miles away, in a small, dimly lit garage, Ethan Carter, a humble mechanic in his early 30s, was finishing up his work for the day. Ethan's life was a stark contrast to Richard's. Struggling to make ends meet, he often worked long hours to support his family, a young daughter, Lily, and his ailing mother. The garage was not just his workplace, but his sanctuary, where he found solace in fixing broken machines. As the rain intensified, Ethan decided to close up shop. But just as he locked the garage door, he spotted the faint glow of headlights flickering in the distance. Something about it caught his attention. Ignoring the downpour, he grabbed his toolkit, hopped into his battered pickup truck, and drove toward the source. When Ethan reached the stranded vehicle, he saw Richard pacing back and forth, soaked and visibly frustrated. Ethan rolled down his window and called out, "Need some help?" Richard, taken aback by the mechanic's appearance, his oil-stained clothes and old truck, hesitated for a moment. But with no other options, he nodded. "Yes, my car just stopped, and I have no idea what's wrong. Can you take a look?" Without a second thought, Ethan pulled over, grabbed his tools, and went to work under the hood of the luxury car. As he examined the engine, he realized the issue wasn't too complicated. A damaged fuel pump that could be temporarily fixed to get the car running. "You're lucky I carry spare parts," Ethan said with a faint smile, trying to lighten the mood. Richard, still skeptical, watched as the mechanic worked diligently in the rain. Despite the freezing cold and the puddles forming around his feet, Ethan's focus never wavered. Within 20 minutes, Ethan had the car humming back to life. Richard, now visibly relieved, offered a curt, "Thank you," and reached for his wallet. He pulled out a crisp $100 bill and extended it to Ethan. But to Richard's surprise, Ethan shook his head. "I didn't do it for the money," he said simply. "Just pay it forward someday." Richard was stunned. He wasn't used to people refusing his money, especially someone who clearly needed it. He nodded, thanked Ethan again, and drove off, leaving the mechanic standing in the rain. What Richard didn't realize at that moment was that this chance encounter would set off a chain of events that would forever alter both their lives. The following week, Richard Morgan was back in the comfort of his corner office, high above the city streets. His luxurious office was a world of polished wood, glass, and the hum of quiet efficiency. Though his company was thriving, Richard's mind kept wandering back to the night in the rain and the humble mechanic who had refused his money. It was a rare gesture in Richard's world, where almost everything seemed to revolve around profit and power. Curiosity got the better of him. He instructed his assistant to find out more about the man who had helped him. "His name's Ethan Carter," Richard recalled from the brief exchange. It didn't take long for his assistant to track down Ethan's garage, tucked away in a less affluent part of town. Richard decided to visit the garage in person. Dressed in a casual blazer and jeans, a rare sight for someone of his stature, he arrived at the small shop. The sight of the rundown building and the modest sign, "Carter's Auto Repairs," struck a chord in Richard. It was a far cry from the polished and state-of-the-art facilities he was accustomed to. Inside, Ethan was hard at work on an old sedan, his hands covered in grease, a wrench in hand. When Richard walked in, Ethan looked up, surprised to see the man he had helped. "Mr. Morgan," Ethan said, wiping his hands on a rag. "What brings you here?" Richard smiled. I came to thank you properly this time. What you did for me that night, it wasn't just fixing my car. It reminded me that kindness still exists in unexpected places. Ethan shrugged modestly. I just did what anyone would do. But Richard could see the strain on Ethan's face, the weariness of someone juggling too many responsibilities. During their conversation, Richard learned about Ethan's life, how he had inherited the garage from his late father, how he was struggling to keep it afloat, and how his daughter Lily was his greatest joy, but also his biggest worry. Ethan confided that Lily was a bright girl with dreams of becoming a doctor, but he feared he wouldn't be able to afford her education. As Richard listened, he felt a pang of guilt. He had spent much of his life chasing profits and growing his empire, often overlooking the struggles of the people around him. Ethan's story was a stark reminder of how different their worlds were. Before leaving, Richard asked Ethan one final question. If you could change one thing in your life right now, what would it be? Ethan thought for a moment before replying, I'd make sure my daughter has a chance at a better future. That's all I want. Richard nodded thoughtfully and left the garage, but something in his heart had shifted. For the first time in years, he felt a deep urge to do something meaningful, not for his company, but for someone who truly deserved it. Little did Ethan know that this visit was just the beginning of a life-changing chapter for both of them. Richard returned to his office, deep in thought about the struggles Ethan had shared with him. For days, he couldn't shake the image of the mechanic's modest garage, his tired eyes, and the sheer determination he had to provide for his daughter. This wasn't a man who asked for handouts. This was someone who deserved a helping hand. Richard called his assistant, Emily, into his office. I want you to look into scholarships and education funds, he began. Also, I want a full report on what it would take to expand Carter's auto repairs into a state-of-the-art facility. Keep this confidential. Emily raised an eyebrow but didn't ask questions. She knew better than to doubt Richard's instincts when he was this focused. Within days, she came back with a detailed report. It included everything from education funds for Lily to a step-by-step plan for revamping Ethan's garage into a modern business capable of handling high-end clients. Richard made his decision. First, he anonymously paid off the mortgage on Ethan's garage, ensuring it was no longer a financial burden. Then, he partnered with an education foundation to secure a scholarship for Lily that would cover her medical school expenses. But he wasn't done yet. Richard wanted to ensure that Ethan's garage would not only survive but thrive. He called his team of engineers and designers, instructing them to work with Ethan to transform his humble shop into one of the best auto repair facilities in the city. He didn't want to overshadow Ethan's hard work, so he planned everything carefully, ensuring the spotlight remained on the mechanic's skills and reputation. Meanwhile, Ethan continued his work, unaware of the storm of changes about to hit his life. His days were the same as ever, fixing cars, managing bills, and spending evenings with Lily, who had just received acceptance letters from several prestigious universities. The thought of her going to college filled him with pride, but also dread. He couldn't imagine how he would ever afford it. One day, a sleek black car pulled into the garage. Ethan recognized it immediately. It was Richard Morgan's car, now spotless and running perfectly after the repairs he had done weeks earlier. Richard stepped out with a confident yet humble demeanor. Ethan, Richard began, I have something I need to show you. Can you spare an hour? Ethan hesitated but nodded. He couldn't say no to the man who had come back to thank him. They got into Richard's car and drove across the city. As they arrived at a bustling neighborhood, Richard pulled up in front of a gleaming new building with a modern sign that read, Carter's Automotive Excellence. Ethan stared in disbelief. What is this? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Richard smiled. This is your garage. Well, technically, it's still yours, but with a few upgrades. I believe in what you're doing, Ethan. You've built something incredible with limited resources, and I wanted to make sure you had the tools to take it even further. Ethan was speechless. He walked through the state-of-the-art facility, marveling at the new equipment, the spacious workstations, and the sleek office area. It was beyond anything he had ever imagined. "There's one more thing," Richard said, handing him an envelope. Inside was the full scholarship confirmation for Lily's education. Ethan's hands trembled as he read the letter. He looked up at Richard, his eyes filled with tears. I don't know how to thank you," Ethan stammered. "You already did," Richard replied. "You reminded me of what truly matters in life, helping others, being kind, and paying it forward." For Ethan and Lily, life was about to change in ways they never dreamed possible. But for Richard, this was just the beginning of a newfound purpose. Ethan couldn't believe his eyes as he walked through the new facility. It wasn't just a garage anymore. It was a fully equipped automotive center, ready to handle everything from basic repairs to high-end luxury vehicles. Richard had even arranged for a team of marketing experts to help Ethan attract a broader customer base, ensuring the business would not only survive, but thrive. For weeks after the unveiling, Ethan worked tirelessly to learn the ins and outs of managing a larger operation. Richard, true to his word, stayed in the background, allowing Ethan to shine as the face of the business. The garage's reputation skyrocketed, attracting clients from all over the city. People admired Ethan's story, a hard-working mechanic who had built something extraordinary from humble beginnings. But the biggest transformation was in Ethan himself. With the financial strain lifted, he could focus on spending more time with Lily. The scholarship Richard had arranged for her was more than just a financial blessing. It was a symbol of hope and opportunity. Lily, overwhelmed with gratitude, threw herself into her studies with renewed determination. She chose to attend one of the top medical schools in the country, vowing to one day make a difference in people's lives, just as Richard had done for her family. Meanwhile, Richard's quiet act of generosity didn't go unnoticed. Though he hadn't sought recognition, word of his action spread. Employees and business partners began seeing him in a new light, not just as a brilliant CEO, but as a man of compassion and integrity. Inspired by his example, others in his company started their own initiatives to give back to the community, creating a ripple effect of kindness. One day, months after the grand opening of the new garage, Ethan received an unexpected visit. It was Richard, standing in the doorway with a warm smile. "Thought I'd stop by to see how things are going," Richard said. Ethan grinned. "Better than I ever imagined. Thank you doesn't even begin to cover it." "You've earned this, Ethan," Richard replied. "All I did was give you the tools. The rest was all you." As they chatted, a car pulled into the garage. It was a middle-aged woman in an old, beat-up sedan. She looked hesitant, as though she couldn't afford the repairs but had no other choice. Ethan immediately went to greet her, offering a kind smile and reassuring words. Watching from a distance, Richard felt a surge of pride. Ethan had become more than a successful business owner. He was a beacon of hope for his community, just as he had been for Richard on that fateful day when the CEO's car broke down. Years later, as Lily graduated from medical school and Ethan expanded his business into multiple locations, the story of the mechanic and the CEO became a local legend. It was a tale of kindness, perseverance, and the profound impact of paying it forward. For Richard, it was a reminder that success isn't measured by wealth alone, but by the lives you touch along the way. And for Ethan, it was proof that even in the darkest times, a single act of kindness could light the way to a brighter future. The legacy they created together wasn't just about business, it was about humanity. And in the end, that was what mattered most.